Okay, I show 5:30. I show that our chair is not here, so I'm assuming those duties, and we'll call the meeting to order. First item is approval of the order of the agenda. I take a motion unless there's changes. A motion? Second. Motion and a second. All in favor of the approval of the order of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, approval of the minutes. Those were circulated with the packet. Comments, questions? A motion? We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from June 11th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We're on to the regular agenda. Item number 1 is withdrawn. Anything else that needs to be said there? I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's nice out. It's summer. We're going to move on. Number 2 is public hearing A24-20, South Pond at the Preserve, 4th edition, request for a variance to exceed a height of an accessory structure. Lot 17, Block 1, South Pond Preserve.
Good evening, Commissioners. Let me get to staff report. Okay, you have before you the variance request for a accessory structure, which is a permitted use within this residential zone. The property in question is a R1A single-family dwelling district and is surrounded on all sides by as such. The applicant has provided the building plans, which are in your packets for review. I'll go in a little bit detail further ahead. But per section 4-442 accessory building and use provisions, no detached accessory building or use in any residential district shall exceed 1 story or 15 feet in height. And that's the basis for the variance request. And just to keep in mind, the maximum 15-foot height allowed is measured from a grade elevation to the highest point of the coping of a flat roof, and grade is defined as the average elevation of the finished ground at the exterior walls of the main building. So let me walk through this a little bit more in context. So this is the property in question, highly programmed, all permitted uses on the property at 2920th 6th Street East. Existing residence, pool with elevated pool deck, current putting green, and some exterior patios extensively landscaped. The site currently has a commonly permitted pedestrian access walkway through it and is very closely adjacent to a stormwater detention plan. So the lot is fairly complex with a few easements which are encumbering upon it. There's a 30-foot pond access easement for maintenance. There's a 55-foot stormwater and bike path easement, and then an additional 10-foot utility bike path easement as well, which run through the property. So the proposal is to add a structure for an accessory structure generally in this location. I'll dial into that a little bit more. This is the existing grades brought from LIDAR that provided by Cass County that shows the slope of the existing property, which generally drains inward toward the pond itself, and the leveling of the pool deck and such on the property line. Site visit brings you this image, and this is walking the pathways generally in a southerly direction on the existing bike path. So here you can see the elevated pool deck, the change in grade, the putting green is beyond the landscaping, boulders and landscaping, and the pond and the landscaping beyond. If you're looking directly east from the bike trail walkway, you will see the stakes for the property and potentially where I think the structure is to be staked. Again, shows the face of the raised pool deck and the slope gradient from the edge of the pedestrian walkway into the property line. This shows it's a little bit different, more to, I would say, toward the north or the south and east semi-direction. And then lastly, this is a view of the property as you would be traveling due north from the pedestrian trail. It shows the area of the property then, and its current landscaping and stabilization of slope on their property and the existing putting green. And again, the height of the raised pool deck. Oh, a little bit more dialed in out there. So the proposal is this. And this is, and all of the sides are in your packet for review, but we're gonna dial right into where we feel the deviation is that we want to focus on. So this is the proposed outline of the foundation of the proposed structure. This is the face of this narrow portion here, which is the most westerly portion of the proposal. So as it is proposed, the substance of the variance is that, as I said, we typically don't allow anything over 15 feet in height. With the change in grade and that definition, ultimately this corner, top of the railing from the raised deck to the foundation at grade in the northwest corner is 19 feet and some change. And then as the structure falls along here, we're looking at potentially 14 feet as the grade extends here at 14 feet, 7.25, with an additional 3.5 feet. And then the face, the exposed face that goes along this edge of the property, ultimately this corner in this location in the southwest corner, mostly adjacent to the pedestrian path, would ultimately be 20 feet, a foot and an inch and a quarter, and then where the structure meets the pool deck would be the 14 feet and 7 inches, so forth. So in our packet, we are recommending denial, as we feel this is in excess of what is the permitted language in our zoning ordinance, and specifically that the criteria isn't found within section 4.566 of Title 4 of the city ordinances is not met. I am here for any questions, and the applicant is here as well. Oh, and I should also mention, you also have in front of you an email that was received late this afternoon from a surrounding property owner who, for your review.
Okay. Lots to unpack there, thank you. This is a public hearing, so maybe I'll first open it up to see if there's public comments. Any public comments? You just
Yes, our variance, to start off with.
maybe just state your name first.
Brian Albrecht.
Thank you.
The variance really was for our height due to the amount of grade. As it sits in the grade, we are still 15 feet to the midpoint of our roof. I know when we talked, it was a little more cosmetic and trying to make it fit the lot better, as it'd be the west corner there that touches the bike path is gonna be sticking out quite a ways. I mean, if we go back to redrawing, we could shorten, but I think overall, we were just wanting to know if we could go up to the elevated 20 feet to the peak of our railing. And if the 15 to the midpoint is correct, is that correct, as I talked to Mark about? To the midpoint of the floor system, or the roof system.
And just so your information, so as we spoke and this evolved,
Yep.
the initial drawings that we received had a pitched roof. So when a structure comes to us and an accessory structure has a pitched roof, the definition by that interpretation from grade is 15 feet to the midpoint of a pitched roof, because it wouldn't be a solid structure. There'd be more airspace above those pitch slope. When you're looking at a standalone structure, ground to straight up, that's 15 feet to the parapet. So that's really this has evolved as we've had conversations, and so that is really the question before us, is what we're evaluating is the application as it stands.
So the ordinance then is 15 feet measured to it was in our packet here, top of
think it's the third or fourth bullet point.
Highest point of the coping of a flat roof.
Yep.
which we could accommodate, I guess, but are you gonna go to the top of the railing?
So the question really here is the evaluation of this drawing that was submitted to us. And so the addition of the foundation is, and the overall sum of it is what's you're asking a variance for.
Okay.
So as we're explaining this, so yes, a structure that is at grade and under the 15 feet to the top of the railing is permitted.
Okay. So as I understand it, we'd have to eliminate our railing, drop down below the 15 feet, and we'd be inside our building, right, sir?
So I would suggest perhaps you want to table this instead of having them be reviewed and make a motion, because I think that the trouble here is we could make, there are many design solutions that we could come up with. And I think instead of doing this on the fly, to give a thoughtful response and a real evaluation, perhaps that would be something you'd like to consider as an applicant.
We could do that.
And then, that this is, since a public hearing would still be, this is the time to ask questions so that we can go back to the table and.
I guess we're in a public hearing, so maybe procedurally, any other public comments? This was helpful.
Okay.
Any other public comments right now?
Oh,
So I think procedurally, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have questions of the applicant or staff?
Was it compliant except to the point of the railing?
it is compliant. It's probably 6 inches taller than what it should be, and then plus the railing. So it'd be 3'6". Had we put a pitched roof on, the actual overall height of the structure would actually be taller. Because, we'd have something like this sitting on it with a standing seam roof.
My only, and I'm not trying to correct you, but I would just say that the challenge really here is the grade change.
It is, and keeping it
So-
level with our pool deck, yes.
Right.
Yep.
So, but there are many creative solutions out there. I think that it's just a matter of getting to that one.
And staff is okay with how close it is to the bike path?
I had it engineered.
Well, that,
And I'm all for moving it. If we need to move it back or do whatever, we kind of talked on that.
so when this would be submitted, if it were to move forward, it would be reviewed by the building department and engineering. So should there be a footing that's encroaching underneath the bike path, that would more than likely be another level of concern for consideration as our approval process. Designs get
Right.
reviewed all the time, and
And we kind of just got something together to get to this stage. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely
I
not.
just was wondering, is there, a setback that they're supposed to be from the bike path? Is there an
Well,
easement?
there is an easement. It's an interesting question you've got there. So, and this property is quite a bit encumbered. So, I can show you contrast between the two. So the easement for the bike path, really, it falls within these two areas, but it doesn't necessarily follow this line. It falls somewhere within, and it amends. I would say that the real actual easement specifically for the bike path it actually cuts across the pool deck and comes down. Now the proposal is to the edge of the easement, and that is permitted. So they are out of the buildable area of the easement, so they are not encumbered by them. But like I said, if there was any sort of underground structure required for the foundation, that would be something to look at a little bit more closely as it went forward. But ultimately,
It looks like it's right to the edge of the bike path.
It's
Yeah,
close.
it
We
is.
staked it out and
It
it's,
concerned me is somebody coming around that corner moving too fast.
yeah, and ultimately, this is the corner that the ultimate height is also exceeded. So that's quite a bit of exposed face of foundation in addition to the height of the structure itself, which was also a staff concern.
which we address would be, you know, if there is exposed foundation, would be sided, landscaped right up to grade.
So you're able to take action as it stands. The applicant, or if you feel like there is more work to be done and you don't wish to take action, you can ask them if they wish to table this, or then we can bring it back and we'll see where this goes.
I mean, I'm confident staff will work with you to get this in compliance. And so if it's all right with you, I will move to table.
Yes.
Until, how about we table it till the August meeting, so we have a date certain,
Yep.
and then if it's needed, great, if it's
Right,
not, it's
and
not.
Then hopefully you don't need a variance and this will be.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? So a motion is to table this issue. Let staff work with the applicant to try to come back with modified variance or maybe no variance at all. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on now. Item number D3, public hearing A24-21, Charleswood River Estates, 13th edition. A request for a replat at 381, 389, and 397 20th Avenue East, lots 4 through 6, Charleswood River Estates, 10th edition. Lisa.
Thank you. This application was received in order to replat 3 residential PUD lots into 2 for sale and development. The proposed subdivision is located on a peninsula along the Cheyenne River and is accessed off the west end of 20th Avenue East via a private drive. The property is zoned planned unit development to allow for greater flexibility in design and developed primarily for large lot, single-family dwellings. The city requires a building control line established on plats when subdivisions are along the Cheyenne River. The building control line by ordinance is established 100 feet from the riverbank per the subdivision ordinance. In 2014, based on information from a firm performing the geotechnical survey, the City Commission passed a resolution and approved a variance to allow the building control line at 75 feet from the established riverbank. Notices were published in the forum and sent to departments. City engineering has indicated there are 3 sets of sewer and water services for the lots being replatted and recommended upon development of the southwest lot. There needs to be a condition where 1 set of services will need to be abandoned and capped as per public works specifications. It is recommended that the city approve the proposed application on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances and subject to the following conditions. Development of proposed lots 1 and 2 will follow the original development plan and standards for the single-family lots as approved with the original Charleswood River Estates 9th edition, as well as the required excavation observation report for each home as noted in the staff report. And number 2, prior to issuance of a building permit for the western lot, 1 set of services will need to be abandoned and capped as per public works specifications. This is a public hearing and I'm available to answer any questions, as are the applicants.
Okay, thank you. So this is also a public hearing, so we'll open public hearing for any public comments. Any public comments? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, questions? I guess I have one. It looked as if the geotechnical information in the packet was done back in 2014. I'm just curious if there's been any other geotech work done in this area. We know the riverbanks along the Cheyenne continue to move and migrate over time. Has this peninsula gotten skinnier, fatter? Do we know?
I do not know the answer to that question. I do know that, they have to do the report, so they had to have done one for this existing home
Sure.
when they developed it.
And then as a follow-on, and you probably covered this, I apologize, but what level of soils analysis would be needed for construction of these proposed homes?
So, according to the resolution, the developer must obtain and submit to the building inspector an excavation observation report approved by a licensed geotechnical engineer or his authorized representative for the individual home, which evidences that an on-site compaction and strength test on foundation subgrade has been performed, and the results of said tests are within acceptable national and local geotechnical engineering standards and specifications to support the proposed home.
And then maybe just one final comment, the bank of the river that was noted in the packet, and there were some distances drawn from that. Do you know, was that back from 2014, or was that done more recently?
It was done in 2014. Originally, it was 100, or well, now I'm trying to remember. When they platted it into the individual lots, it was developed as 75 feet. Prior to this, it was one lot, and there was an individual who's going to build a home on the peninsula. And so at that point, there wasn't the private drive within the plat, and it was a 100-foot riverbank control line for a single lot for a home.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Motion and a second to approve, and that's with the conditions noted. I think there's 4 of them, is that right?
Correct.
There are two.
2 conditions, sorry.
With the condition.
Can you scroll to that page with the recommendations, please?
I added an additional one this afternoon after the comments from sorry about that, from the city engineer about abandoning the utilities. Sorry about that.
Okay. Motion and a second with the 2 conditions approved. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, next item, public hearing A24-22, Simpsons, 7th edition. A request for a retracement plat and a variance to reduce the building control line of the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay District to construct an addition onto an existing home at 1444 Cheyenne Street and 1442 River Street, lots 1 and 2, block 1, Simpsons, 2nd edition.
Thank you. This application was received in order to combine 2 lots into one and to allow for reduction of the building control line of the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay Zoning District standards for an addition onto a single-family home. The applicant is proposing to combine 2 lots previously subdivided to construct an attached garage and addition onto their single-family dwelling. A preliminary site plan was submitted with the plat and application showing a proposed addition on the south side with the existing home on current lot 1. Property owners wishing to combine properties which have previously been platted for the purpose of building across lot lines and/or increasing lot area to address district requirements may submit a retracement plat subject to conditions. The applicant is also requesting a variance for a reduction of the building control line of the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay. At their June 17th, 2024 meeting, City Commission meeting, the applicant's representative requested that the City Commission authorize issuance of a building permit prior to the merging of the 2 platted lots. The Commission voted to send this request to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their review and recommendation prior to additional action. The western portion of the subject property is located within the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay Zoning District, which establishes a building control line that restricts structures, parking lots, fill, and other development that may cause increased riverbank destabilization within 100 feet of the established riverbank as determined by the city engineer. The applicant would like to demolish a portion of the single-family house and reconstruct an addition and construct an attached garage with access to the east. The existing home was constructed in 1950 and has been found to be encroaching into the 100-foot riverbank control line. With the southwest corner of the proposed foundation located approximately 89 feet from the established riverbank. The western edge of the existing home is 76 feet from the established riverbank. The current house encroaches on the building control line by 24 feet, and the proposed encroachment for the new addition is less than what is currently encroaching. As provided for in section 4-431-C.3 of the zoning regulations, the City Commission may reduce the required building control line where it can be demonstrated through a soils analysis that soils are stable within the building control area. Requests for reduction of the building control area are handled via the variance process. In accordance with the provisions of the ordinance, the applicant has employed a geotechnical firm to provide a soils analysis in respect to the existing home and the proposed addition. The soil analysis concludes that the home will not be impacted by soil instability caused by the riverbank. The soils analysis has been reviewed by the city engineer, who has no concerns regarding soil stability based on the findings of the soil analysis. A copy of the analysis is attached to the staff report for reference. Notices were sent to property owners within 150 feet and applicable agencies and departments. A call was received from an area property owner who is in support of the request. It is recommended that the city approve the retracement plat on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, and approval of the reduction of the building control line from 100 feet to approximately 89 feet for the proposed structure on the basis of the following findings. 4-431-C.3 states that where it can be demonstrated through a soils analysis that soils are stable within the building control area, the City Commission may consider reduction of the required minimum setback by variance. Number 2, the applicant has provided a soil analysis which demonstrates the soils are sufficiently stable to support the house that encroaches into the 100-foot building control line, which has been reviewed and found to be satisfactory by the city engineer. Number 3, the reasons set forth in the application justify the approval of the reduction of the building control line, and it is the minimum variance necessary to accommodate the existing structure. Number 4, a letter/agreement be signed by the property owner acknowledging the variance and waiving the city's liability. This is a public hearing. I'm available to answer any questions, as are the applicants and the applicant's representative.
Great, thank you. Okay, public hearing, we'll open that. Any public comments? Any public comments? Close the public hearing. Commissioners.
So if you did the work, they recommend approval with the 4 recommendations.
Okay, got a motion and a second to approve with the 4 conditions noted. Any other discussion? No. Good work. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, any non-agenda items? No non-agenda items. We're going to adjourn from our regular meeting. Do we need a motion to adjourn? I'm not sure if you need.
Normally the chair can just adjourn.
I'm going to adjourn from the regular meeting, and we're going to move into the discussion agenda, where we have one item, proposed revisions to Title 4 ordinances regarding landscaping. Aaron.
All right. Thank you and good afternoon. So for today's discussion agenda, we wanted to continue our ongoing targeted amendments to the Title IV zoning regulations. And so today's topic is our landscaping ordinance. Similar to all of the other tweaks that we've been bringing forward to you, there's kind of the common theme here is we're really focusing on organization and simplicity of the language. Especially with the landscaping, removing some of the subjectivity, establishing some objective standards for various types of landscaping that's required with various projects. And so I'll provide a brief overview here today, and then certainly feel free to ask any questions along the way as we go here. But before diving in, just to kind of orient everybody with how the landscaping ordinance intended to be structured here. There's really 5 different types of landscaping that the ordinance speaks to that are outlined in the cover memo here. The first is open space landscaping, and that's just your general purpose landscaping. That's based on the zoning district that the property is located within, as well as the square footage of the lot. The second is parking lot perimeter landscaping, and that's going to be specific to anytime you have a parking lot within so many feet of a public right-of-way, just requiring a strip of landscaping between that parking lot and the public way to kind of break up that visual view of the parking lot and parked cars. The third requirement is parking lot island landscaping, and so that's when you have especially for larger parking lots, those islands with trees or vegetation, just to kind of break up the large swath of pavement. The fourth requirement is the boulevard trees, and those are your standard street trees that you see within the public right-of-way. And then the fifth is buffer yards, and buffer yards are specific when we have potentially incompatible land uses adjacent to one another. Typically, it's the more intensive use is required to buffer to help protect the less intensive use. So those are the 5 categories of landscaping that I'll kind of speak to as I go through here. In addition to the landscaping ordinance proper, there's also landscaping requirements within several of our, especially overlay zoning districts. And so you will see there are some slight tweaks to those overlay zoning districts. More often than not, just referring back to the landscaping standards. And then there are some additional standards that are applicable to the individual overlays. But the intent is to get all of the landscaping requirements into one place to make it more user-friendly for anybody trying to navigate the ordinances. And then the kind of last thing I'll mention before kind of summarizing or walking through the code here is there are also some additional tweaks that we may have to the fencing and screening requirements. There are screening standards throughout the code that very much relate and kind of complement the landscaping requirements. So there are several spots right now in the Title IV that speak to screening, and so the intention would be to bring that all into one location, make sure that it's kind of relates nicely with the fencing. So the fencing requirements, the screening requirements, and the landscaping requirements, they're consistent across all 3 of those requirements, and we're not doubling up on requirements and different things. Because the way it exists right now, it's very chunky like that, and it's a little bit confusing to try and understand. You might have screening requirement that talks about a specific type of fencing, and then the landscaping ordinance talks about some additional landscaping that's required. And so I'm trying to create some more consistency between those requirements. So with that, just to kind of skim through the structure of the ordinance itself as you kind of read through it here, we have a purpose section that's largely unchanged from the existing ordinance, just talking through the purpose of the landscaping ordinance. Subsection B here, applicability, that is a new addition. Currently, the landscaping ordinance doesn't have, it's silent as to when the landscaping requirements are, really required. When do they kick in? We require it obviously for any new development, but when you have situations of, maybe an addition or, reconfiguration of an existing site, the current ordinance is really silent on that. And so, trying to basically define when and when not landscaping requirements are required. And so basically any new development is required to comply with any existing landscaping requirements at the time. There are some exceptions here that are listed, single and 2-family residential. That's consistent with the current landscaping ordinance. Agricultural zoning districts also unchanged. Subsection C here regarding parking lots, that's a new addition. Basically, if you're repaving or restriping a parking lot, you're not required to do any landscaping. But once you start to add on to that parking lot by 50% or more of the lot area or 50% or more of the parking spaces, that's when it starts to trigger some of the landscaping to come into, some of the site to come into compliance with the landscaping ordinance. The DMU zoning district is exempt from this landscaping section. The DMU district, obviously, it tries to encourage a lot more buildings up front along the street right-of-way, a lot more building space taking up the lot area. And we had a question, yep.
Interrupt you for a second. On the parking lot expansion, is that a new part of the code, or is that existing in today's code?
That's a new addition.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So the DMU district would be exempt. There are some specific parking lot screening that is specific to the DMU district, for example. Same with, street trees. Downtown has a unique, public right-of-way design. And then subsection E talks about improvements and repairs. So this again is getting to the situations when you're adding on to an existing building, or there's maybe a change in use in subsection there, or subsection F there. Basically, if it's a small addition under 1,000 square feet or 10% of the existing floor area, whichever of those two numbers is greater, as long as you're under that number, you're exempt. If you go over that number, that's when the landscaping requirements kick in. So provides a little bit of a gradient there. Next section C talks about landscaping plan required. That just kind of codifies what we currently do right now, which is we require a landscaping plan at the time of building permitting. It also talks about getting the certificate of occupancy if a building is constructed and they're looking for a certificate of occupancy in the middle of winter, they haven't had a chance to put their landscaping in. It talks about how we handle that situation in terms of identifying a date and then issuing a temporary certificate of occupancy until such time that they're able to follow up with the installation of the landscaping. Section D is general land standards. That just talks about your kind of general purpose requirements or general requirements for all the different types of landscaping. Talks about the different types of tree materials, different classification of tree types, whether it's a large deciduous tree, large evergreen tree, small evergreen tree, shrubs, perennial plants. Talks about the minimum size at the time of planting that those different materials need to be, and the mature size to qualify, for that specific species of tree to qualify as a large tree, it has to be at least 30 feet tall at maturity, for example. Talks about maintenance, the responsibility of the landowner to kind of keep and maintain the landscaping. A lot of that is carried forward from the current ordinances. Subsection 3, administrative approval for practical landscaping improvements. This is a new addition, or I should say it's partially a new addition. Currently, the existing ordinance does allow for some flexibility to the buffer yard standards in situations where, you might have a very large lot, for example, and a very small building, and it doesn't make maybe sense for them to install a landscaping buffer along the entire frontage of that boundary if, the perceived impactful development is only, far away or on a small portion of the lot. And so it does grant staff with some degree of flexibility to deviate from the letter of the law in such cases where the intent is still being realized. And so that's been expanded upon slightly to apply to, kind of all sections of this code if it makes sense to, there's some sort of hardship or it makes sense to modify the location of some of the landscaping units to provide better buffering, for example. It allows some degree of flexibility there if reviewed and approved by staff. And so now we start to get into those 5 different types of landscaping. So the open space landscaping, again, is the general purpose landscaping. Here, commercial and office zoning districts require more plant units than residential, mixed use, and public districts, for example. So there's kind of 3 different classifications there. I will say staff is still tinkering a little bit with the details. So I think the structure is pretty sound, the way it's structured, but in terms of the specific numbers and different things, we do anticipate some degree of modification as we continue to kind of iron out the rough edges, if you will. And we'll kind of point those out once this comes back to you all in the future here. But for example, today, the industrial district, if there's an industrial zoning district that's also within a corridor overlay, it does require the same amount of landscaping as any commercial district. And so we'll want to tweak that a little bit to make it more consistent with how the current landscaping ordinance is. System of plant units, large trees are worth 10 plant units, small trees worth 5. There were some tweaks to those numbers, but the concept of the plant units is carried through from the existing ordinance. Again, the number of required plant units is based on the zoning district and then the square footage.
Aaron, sorry to interrupt again.
Yep.
Are those equivalent units, is that something is that standardized across the metro or national standards, or how do we come up with these?
Yep. So for all of these tweaks we're bringing forward, generally we're working with Clarion Associates. They've provided kind of the first rendition of these, and then we take what they provide for recommendations, and then we further revise them to kind of better mesh with our existing ordinances, and in some cases better mesh with other metros. And so the plant unit equivalence, that is pretty common. It's not universal by any means, but we currently use plant unit equivalents in our current ordinance. The city of Fargo utilizes plant units in their ordinance. I believe Bismarck and Grand Forks also use the plant unit equivalents.
Thanks.
So the alternative is to, just use canopy trees or ornamental trees, and it's kind of all the same, if you will, but at the end of the day.
I like this. I just was curious on the Y5, Y10, whatever, but.
Yep. And so those are, things that can be tweaked if there are, questions or concerns on those. But, generally, having larger trees, especially the canopy trees, that is something specifically called out within the comprehensive plan in terms of increasing the city's, urban forestry, urban canopy. And so, obviously, having more plant units applied to those larger trees is kind of the intent there. Parking lot perimeter landscaping, again, a second category of landscaping here. This is only applicable when you have a parking lot within 30 feet of a public right-of-way. If the parking lot is behind the building or further away from the right-of-way, there's no requirement. It's only when the parking lot is within proximity to a public right-of-way. Here again, there's kind of bigger perimeter landscaping is required for bigger parking lots. So smaller parking lots, you don't have to have as much screening. Larger parking lots require a little bit more screening, and then it does, excuse me, it does provide for some various options. And here is, again, another area that we're still kind of tinkering with some of the options here. Parking lot island landscaping. This is carried forward from the current ordinance. One change here is providing a graphic to kind of better illustrate what's being discussed. And so the requirement here is anytime you have 20 or more parking spaces adjacent to one another, you can't have any more than 20 parking spaces adjacent to one another without having those parking spaces broken up by a landscape island. So that 20 space number is in our current ordinance. The only change here is that we'd be requiring trees within the landscape islands, whereas trees are optional right now. You could put trees or shrubs. So that's one thing to be aware of.
Any concern about limiting visibility? I know Menards has some of these, and you try coming out and you have to creep out and look around because,
Yeah.
they're fairly low.
Yep.
So that'd be my main concern is, are you gonna create a hazard by not having them trimmed up or whatever?
Yep. We do have some sightline visibility standards within the code that I know the street tree ordinance specifically references the visibility area there in terms of from a certain height to a certain height needs to be clear. And so I think one option there is to make that applicable to any driving corner perhaps, is to for a situation where we have a private drive that that section may not specifically apply to. So but no, that's a good comment. Section 8 here, boulevard trees. This is largely unchanged. I will say too, we're looking to schedule a meeting with our city forester to kind of talk through some of these the street tree specific ordinances and see if there's any updates that he would like to see in terms of the street tree requirements. The city forester does maintain an approved tree planting list. Yep.
Question, I don't know if it's still the practice, or it used to be the practice, that they put money into escrow for boulevard trees.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been into the new developments, you'll see some nice big trees, you'll see no trees, because some people didn't get around to it. Is there any thought at having the developer just put in all the trees at a certain point after the start of development? And I don't know how they would
Yeah.
create a hazard as far as building the house. You can get around the trees, but if you drive through certain neighborhoods, you see, like, say, nice trees are mature and others that people just planted a tree a year ago.
Yep. I don't want to speak for the city forester, but I know he has mentioned in the past that they are looking to make some modifications to that system. I think they are looking to be kind of be more proactive when people don't install their street trees to kind of, I don't know if it's them wanting to take that on and plant it themselves, or if there's some type of kind of follow-up that would happen if they don't plant the street tree within a certain amount of time. But I anticipate that would be kind of one of the topics of conversations that we'd have with the city forester. I can't say for certain whether or not something would show up in the actual ordinance. It's not. I don't believe it's currently in the ordinance today. It's just kind of our standard practice, and so that's more of maybe a policy decision more than an ordinance decision. But I hope to we'll have an answer for you, I think, next time around with that. So yeah, like I said, not much has changed here other than the structure for the boulevard trees, but we still need to have that discussion with the city forester, and so there may be some additional tweaks that forestry would like to see there. And then lastly, the buffer yards. So the buffer yards, we have a buffer yard requirement currently in our current ordinance. We are tweaking it slightly. Right now, the way that the buffer yards work is it's based on the zoning district specifically. So if you have development taking place within a certain zoning district that's adjacent to a different zoning district, there's a table that tells you what type of buffer you need to have between those two zoning districts. The way that it's being kind of slightly tweaked here is that it's dependent on the type of development. And so if you have a more intensive type of development adjacent to a less intensive zoning district, that's what would trigger the screening requirements. So you might have a public works facility or something that's in a residential zoning district. And currently there would be no buffering requirements, but if that's a more intensive type use, the idea is that it would still require a buffering perhaps. And so we're still kind of playing with this language as well, but that's the concept here. There is a table that outlines the different types of uses. So when you have a multifamily residential development of 4 or more units, for example, adjacent to a single or 2-family residential zoning district, they'd be required to provide one of these 2 options in terms of that minimum buffer. And then as you go down the table, the uses become kind of more intensive, if you will, and so the minimum buffer beefs up from there. All the way down at the bottom, if you have any industrial development taking place next to any non-industrial district, especially if it's a residential or mixed-use district, it requires a minimum 8-foot tall fence and adequate and opaque, minimum 8-foot tall opaque screening fence and a 20-foot wide landscape buffer. And so the landscape buffers are outlined here. For the most part, each buffer requires some type of evergreen tree to make sure that it's providing screening year-round. So that's kind of the meat of the landscaping ordinance, and then from there, there are several. The landscaping ordinance currently has its own individual section on definitions, and so we're proposing to take those definitions out of landscaping ordinance and just insert them into the definitions section of Title IV, along with all the other zoning definitions. And so some slight tweaks to the existing definitions are proposed. Those will be relocated. And then, like I mentioned, there are some slight tweaks as well to some of the, especially the overlay districts. And so just as an example here, this is the commercial office, this isn't an overlay, this is the commercial office park district, which has its own set of landscaping standards. And so we're keeping the requirement that at least 25% of the property be landscaped. And then we're just saying in accordance with the landscaping standards of section 4-449A. And then everything else is kind of repetitive, and so we're looking to scratch that and just have it be referenced back to the landscaping ordinance. So similar language in some of the overlay districts in terms of open space landscaping. The corridor overlay requires larger setbacks for parking lots, and so we're proposing to keep that unchanged. Just removing some of the repetitive language that's already covered in the landscaping ordinance. last section 2 that we were going to discuss with the city forester is related to the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay District. Right now, it just refers to the landscaping section. The landscaping section currently does have some language on tree preservation. And so we're looking to just relocate that to the actual Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay Zoning District so that it's clear to anybody within that district that the trees in healthy condition should be preserved. And then if anybody does want to remove diseased or unhealthy trees from the river buffer area, they need to coordinate that with the city forester.
Is it just in that district?
That would be just in that district, correct?
Because I know there's instances in the past, and I know contractors like to work with a blank slate. I'll just use a Hornbacher's location. There was a shelter belt there. And granted, maybe the trees are in bad shape. I don't know. I don't even know if the forester looked at it. They went and just took them all out, and then they come back and, yeah, they put in the required evergreens, the 4 foot or whatever, but it's gonna be like 20 years before they're ever something in it. I think ideally, if we can preserve trees are in good shape or good health yet, anywhere on any development, I would think that would be a goal we should have in mind
Yeah.
versus just taking them all out. And it's not only the Hornbacher side, I've seen it happen elsewhere. They come in and it's just easier to take it all out than come back and drop some trees in. But then, again, the trees are all little miniatures for many years, so.
Yeah, I know some cities have that, and I think we have some degree of language in our current ordinance that we can kind of carry through. But we can take a look at how other cities kind of structure similar type requirements and incorporate that into here. And then, let's see.
So, Aaron, just to comment on that, and maybe this isn't not all of my ideas are good, so that's fair if this one sucks too, but back to the equivalent planting units, perhaps preserving an existing tree could qualify for more units than a new little mini tree as a way to make that incentive. A living existing tree, not a dying existing tree.
Yep. Yeah, we'll put together some suggestions for that.
What's the process for like replacing a tree in a boulevard that dies? Boulevards are kind of hostile environments for trees.
Yep.
I think Mike was talking about more times than not, if trees die out there, they don't get replaced. Is that a requirement, or if
Yep.
it's, the developer's gone and everything's developed, and the tree dies, what happens?
Yep, I think so. For any removal or any planting of a street tree, it does require a permit basically through the city forester. And so there, again, I don't want to speak for the city forester, but I do believe that it's kind of the property owner's responsibility to make sure that they have the healthy street trees. If they met the requirement of planting their street tree and it dies, then I believe it's the city that would come in and potentially replace that. But I again defer that question to the city forester, and that's something I can confirm with him in terms of how that currently works. So, yeah, with that, that's kind of the summary version that we've got right now. So, I will say too that I don't know if you guys have read through the existing ordinance, but it is, I think, just over 30 pages long. The new revised ordinance, excluding the definitions, we managed to cut down, I think, at least by half, and so that is something that we were looking to do, is to kind of streamline the ordinance, and I think especially with this one, it was the reorganization was kind of well worth the effort in this case. So anyhow, happy to answer any questions or to dive in deeper to any of these sections, but we do anticipate continuing to tinker with these, and so if we do have substantial changes, we will likely be bringing this back as a discussion item for a second time. If they're minor tweaks, then we might just put it on the agenda for your consideration. But, so I just wanted to, I guess, throw that out there for, just as an FYI, I guess.
And Aaron, when you've gone from 30 pages to 14, you've made sure you haven't omitted anything that was critical and it was more duplication type things, is that?
Yeah, and that's where, the only section that comes to mind when you mention that is the screening standards, which again is not included in this packet material here. And so that's one section. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of tweaks to that, but that's one section that we have to spend a little more time with. And again, if there are substantial tweaks, that's something we'd want to put on the discussion agenda one more time. So, but outside of that, I don't believe so. A lot of it was, definitions. There was a lot of, trying to think of, a lot of it was truly repetitive in terms of the screening, the fencing. And a lot of it too was, is very kind of narrative based. And I think the new ordinance relies a little bit heavier on tables and charts and things, which helps cut down on some of the number of pages at least, so.
Good work.
You didn't just cut the font size in half.
Yeah, that might be part of it.
It looks larger, actually.
We haven't run a word count, I guess, so. But like always, if you have other questions after today's meeting, always feel free to reach out and provide those comments or questions to staff after the fact.
Okay, any other comments, questions for Aaron or others? Okay, I'm going to adjourn from the discussion agenda, and thanks for your work.
Thank you all.